There's a strange moment that almost everyone experiences. A moment where time seems to pause right after you realize, I shouldn't have done that. Maybe it was one careless decision, one sentence said too quickly, one small action you wish you could rewind. And the worst part? For a long time, that moment feels like a stain you can't wash away. But here's something most people only realize much later. Sometimes the mistake you wish never happened is exactly the moment that quietly begins to reshape the person you will become. There was once a boy named Noah who lived in a quiet neighborhood where the houses looked almost identical. Same fences, same small gardens, same bicycles leaning against the walls. Life there moved slowly. In the afternoons, children played in the street, while adults talked across hedges and watered their plants. Noah had a neighbor named Mrs. Alvarez. She was older, lived alone, and spent most of her days tending a small garden behind her house. Her tomatoes were famous in the neighborhood. People often joked that they tasted better than anything from the supermarket. One afternoon, Noah and his friends were playing soccer in the street. The goalposts were two backpacks. The ball was old and half deflated, but to them, it felt like the World Cup. Noah was the striker, the one who always wanted to score the winning goal. "Pass!" he shouted. The ball rolled toward him. He kicked it as hard as he could. For a moment, it was perfect. The ball flew straight towards the goal. Then it curved slightly, just enough. It sailed over the backpacks, over the sidewalk, and straight into Mrs. Alvarez's garden. A second later, they heard it. Crash! Silence filled the street. Noah ran to the fence and looked over. The ball had knocked over a wooden stand where several tomato plants were growing. One of the plants had snapped completely in half. Bright red tomatoes were scattered across the soil. His friends slowly backed away. "Let's go," one of them whispered. Noah felt a knot in his stomach, but he nodded and ran with them down the street. That evening, he tried not to think about it. But later, when the sun had already set, he looked out of his window. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez was in the garden, carefully picking up the broken pieces of the plant. Her movements were slow, quiet, almost patient. But something about it made Noah feel worse than if she had been angry. The next morning, he walked past the garden on his way outside. The broken stand had been repaired, but the plant that had snapped was gone. An empty space remained in the soil. Mrs. Alvarez was watering the other plants. She looked up and smiled politely. "Good morning, Noah." He froze for a moment. "Good morning." She didn't mention the plant, not once, and somehow that made the mistake heavier. Days passed, but the empty spot in the garden stayed in Noah's mind. Every time he walked by, he saw it, a small gap where something used to grow. One afternoon, he stopped at the fence. Mrs. Alvarez was planting new seedlings, small, fragile ones. He hesitated. Then he finally said it. "I'm sorry." She looked up. "For what?" "The tomato plant, the one that broke." She wiped her hands on a cloth and walked closer. For a moment, she studied his face. Then she nodded slowly. "I wondered if it was you." Noah stared at the ground. "I should have told you." "Yes," she said gently. "You should have." There was a quiet pause. Then she surprised him. "Would you like to help me plant the new ones?" Noah looked up. "Really?" She handed him a small shovel. "Plants break sometimes," she said. "What matters is what we grow afterward." Together they worked in the garden, digging small holes, placing the new plants carefully into the soil, covering the roots, watering them. Weeks passed. The seedlings grew taller, then stronger. Eventually, small green tomatoes appeared. One evening, Mrs. Alvarez handed Noah a small basket. Inside were 3 perfectly ripe tomatoes. "Take them," she said. Noah smiled. "Thank you." As he walked home, something felt different. The mistake hadn't disappeared. The plant had still broken, but somehow that moment had changed something inside him. Years later, Noah would still remember that small, broken plant in Mrs. Alvarez's garden. Not because it was a tragedy, and not because the mistake disappeared, but because that day taught him something most people only learn much later in life. Mistakes don't just show us where we failed, they reveal where we can grow. Before that moment, Noah only cared about the goal, the excitement, the game. After that moment, he began to understand responsibility, honesty, and the quiet courage it takes to admit when something went wrong. The broken plant didn't define him, but what he chose to do after it broke did. And that's the part many people miss. Your biggest mistakes are not permanent marks against you. There are moments that force you to pause, reflect, and sometimes become more patient, more thoughtful, and more aware of the people around you. Just like the soil in that garden had to be opened before something new could grow, sometimes life uses mistakes to open something inside us. So the next time you remember a moment you wish you could undo, don't only see the damage. Look at who you became afterward. Because the truth is simple. Your mistakes are not the end of your story. They are often the quiet beginning of the person you are still becoming.